Anyway, the sheer scale of this production is really impressive. We have some pretty wild stunts and air acrobatics and scenes from the sky. There's blood and nudity. I just had no idea that movies were like this back then. Welcome back to The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be continuing to rank all the Best Picture nominees ever, and we'll find out what the best movie for each year was and all time. Now today, I'm ranking Wings, the 1927 Best Picture nominee starring Clara Bow, Charles Buddy Rogers, Richard Arlen, and Gary Cooper, with a story from John Monk Saunders and Byron Morgan, titles by Julian Johnson, and a screenplay written by Hope Loring and Louis D. Leighton. It was directed by William A. Wellman and Harry Dabadrast.
What language is this?
Harry, crazy last name. It was nominated for 2 Academy Awards and won them both, one for Best Engineering Effects and the other for Best Picture. Now, if you're enjoying these rankings or just like the idea of getting a review of all the Oscar-nominated movies, then please consider subscribing and or following, liking, and reviewing. Please put any of your questions, comments, or suggestions into the comments or email the show. And if you super duper like it, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TheRankPodcast, where you can get access to all of the archived episodes. Now, longtime fans of the show will know that the first nominee of this year, Seventh Heaven, was ranked by Zach and I, and the second, The Racket, was ranked by Mike and I. So this year, even though it only had 3 nominees, went through a whole bunch of iterations of the rank. So I figure why not round it out with doing the last one solo. So just as a reminder, Seventh Heaven got a 69.25, putting it in the mediocre tier, and The Racket got a 75.5, putting it in the I'd watch it again tier. So that's the number to beat. If the Academy got this one right, it has to be higher than that. Let's dive in, starting with the Potent Notables. As always, we start the Potent Notables with the box office info. Wings made $3.8 million in rentals domestically. Now, as a reminder, rentals were essentially profits. That's what they called profits back then for some reason. So they had a $2 million budget, which I would assume means the revenue was around $6 million. So this is the movie that launched Gary Cooper's career. Now, he's only in the movie for a brief time, but his close-up cemented his heartthrob status. What's interesting is that he got his start essentially because Clara Bow saw him on the Paramount lot, took a fancy to him, and insisted that they cast him in her upcoming film, It. That was the movie that made Clara Bow a star, and also the movie that made her and Gary a couple. Of course, that was short-lived, as Gary Cooper is known for sleeping with, if not literally, pretty close to literally, every single one of his female co-stars. That's probably because, as Lupe Velez said, his co-star in the 1929 film The Wolf Song, he, quote, has the biggest organ in Hollywood, but not the ass to push it in well, end quote.
Wow. Wow.
Okay then, Lupe, that's a fantastic quote, and I'm so happy I found it. Anyway, this one movie has a similar story to The Racket. For those of you who already listened to that episode, you may remember that the film was lost, but they found a copy in Howard Hughes's personal collection and were able to restore it. This one also was lost for decades until a copy was discovered in the Cinémathèque Française film archive in Paris. So that was the film. The score of the film was located in the Library of Congress. It was believed that this was the only manuscript left of the music. It's kind of crazy that we were able to pull this together. It's crazy that I've been able to see this movie, considering what it had to go through to be restored. Now, we've covered a couple movies that have had the cooperation of the US military at this point, as recently as a few weeks ago with Mission Impossible. Well, this was the first one that the US military cooperated with, starting a long relationship with Hollywood. The US military provided around 3,500 soldiers, millions of dollars worth of equipment, and virtually all of the pursuit planes the Army had. That's pretty wild. So speaking of military cooperation, 2 injuries happened during the production. Considering everything going on, maybe you guys watched this before you're listening to this or watching it, that doesn't seem too bad, really. One was a stunt pilot who broke his neck and then returned to the company 6 weeks later. The other was an Army pilot that was helping out on the shoot. And in a sign of true empathy, William Wellman, the director, worried that it would shut down production. But thankfully, the Army held the pilot responsible instead of the director. So Everything worked out just fine. Hey, Willie. So this was also the first film that actors were filmed flying in the air. Charles Buddy Rogers did not know how to fly a plane when production began, but learned how to by the end of it. During filming, Rogers' flight instructor and sometime backup pilot was Lieutenant Hoyt Vandenberg. Now, for our airmen out there, you'll recognize the name from Vandenberg Air Force Base. Vandenberg later became a 4-star general commanding the 9th Air Force in World War II and served as the U.S. Air Force's first official chief of staff after the war, when the Air Force was made a separate branch of the military. Now, for close-up scenes where Jack and David and other characters are flying, the actors are actually working the planes themselves. To shoot these scenes, a camera was strapped to the engine cowling, which is crazy. The actors had to get the plane up in the air, keep it up, fly it so that clouds or German fighter planes could be seen in the background, operate the motorized camera, and land the plane and act at the same time. So during Rogers' early flights, Vandenberg would hide in the back seat of the plane and operate the controls while Rogers gave his performance. It's pretty wild. I mean, this is really involved. So first in flight and in nudity. Wings is also one of the first widely released films to show nudity. In the enlistment office are nude men undergoing physical exams who can be seen from behind through a door which is open and closed. And Clara Bow's breasts are revealed for, a split second, but during the Paris bedroom scene when military police barge in as she is changing her clothes. I just was surprised by this. And finally, this was the first movie to win Best Picture, and it was the only fully silent movie to win it. I know The Artist won it in 2011, but it wasn't fully silent. There you go. Those are the potent notables. I thought they were pretty good. Let's go to the movie overview. So another foray into silent movie action. I didn't have high hopes for this one going in. I thought The Racket was pretty good and Seventh Heaven was fine, so I figured I would think this is pretty good for the time. And not to give away the rank, I was pleasantly surprised by this one. It started at an advantage because it had clearly been remastered, so the picture was much clearer than the other two films had been, but I tried not to let that influence it when it came to comparing the other two. So Wings is a war epic that focuses on the Air Force during World War I. We lead off with a quote from Charles Lindbergh, quote, "In that time, feats were performed and deeds accomplished which were far greater than any peace accomplishments of aviation," end quote. We're immediately getting a sense of the epic that this wants to be. It's got a large scope, but they try to scale it down a bit by introducing our protagonists, Jack, Mary, David, and to a lesser degree, Sylvia. The movie lets us know that Sylvia and David like each other, but Jack doesn't know that and likes Sylvia and thinks she likes him back. Of course, poor Mary has been crushing on Jack for a long time and Jack is just oblivious. So basically the only two that have any idea what they really want are David and Sylvia. This becomes a sort of love triangle, which results in Jack and David spoiling for a fight. And I'm giving a little bit away here, but the movie came out almost 100 years ago, so it feels like if you're listening to this episode or watching it, you should have already seen it. Anyway, David and Jack end up becoming best friends. An aspect of this war epic that felt a little out of place was the character named Shrimp. He's our comic relief guy, but the comic relief is just very slapstick. And I get it, they can't really tell jokes because it's silent, but I mean, this was really goofy. Also, was there an historic xenophobia toward the Dutch in the early 20th century? I haven't heard of this. But poor Shrimp Fear has to keep proving himself as a patriot because he's Dutch. I mean, I get it. It makes me throw up in my mouth a little too. But I didn't know that my feeling toward the Dutch was an inherited trait. I'm kidding, by the way, in case that isn't coming across.
Didn't sound like a joke.
Anyway, the sheer scale of this production is really impressive. We have some pretty wild stunts and air acrobatics and scenes from the sky. There's blood and nudity. I just had no idea that movies were like this back then. But besides the blood and nudity, it was just a well put together film that was trying to give you a sense of what war was like, and it was effective at that. So let's see if the Academy got it right with their first Best Picture selection. Is it better than Seventh Heaven and The Racket? How does it rank against more modern films that have already been ranked? Let's go to the rank and find out.
A rank.
The rank is where I rank the movie based on 10 categories: story, acting, originality, film coherence, cinematography, score/soundtrack/sound, script structure and dialogue, character relatability, production value, and my rank. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst and 10 being the best. Now, if you're new to this show, you know that I typically rank movies on a scale of 1 to 5. A long time ago, we decided we'd do 1 to 10 for the Best Picture nominees because it would give us more leeway, but really what ended up happening is we just ended up closer to 10 as opposed to being closer to a 5, but whatever. Now, the first category is story, which I gave a 7.5. The story is good. It wants to be a love story about Jack and Mary. It also wants to be a love story about David and Sylvia. It also wants to be a love story about David and Jack. But really, it's a love story about the Air Force during World War I. It's fine to effective for the first 3, but it's excellent at the last. So let's go to the next category, which is acting, which I give a 7. There's a lot of very campy acting in this and hamming it up for the camera, but it's a silent movie, so there needs to be. I'm definitely giving it a break for that reason, but it's still not great. It's not bad, though. I want to be clear. This is pretty good acting. So let's go to originality, which I gave an 8.5. I don't think it was original to do a movie that centers around World War I at the time. However, to film in the sky, in planes, that's pretty darn original for 1927. So the next category is film coherence, which I gave a 6. It's a little all over the place. We have these weird slapstick comedy moments and then heavy romantic feeling and then some really grim depictions of war. I mean, that's fine, but it definitely kept you like on your toes, like what's coming next? So not the most coherent, but not terrible either. So let's go to cinematography, which I give a 9.25. I felt like they took a lot of risks here and really explored their options as far as this category goes. I thought it was really impressive. They also didn't linger too much in close-ups, and this felt in a lot of ways that this was a more modern film as far as cinematography mechanics, so pretty impressive. So let's go to score/soundtrack/sound, which I gave a 9. The soundtrack was great. Actually, after watching this movie, I'm inclined to lower my scores for Seventh Heaven and The Racket, because if a silent movie soundtrack can be this good, then they should have been a lot better. But anyway, let's go to the next category, which is script structure and dialogue, and I gave that an 8.25. Now, obviously there's not much dialogue, but the frames with writing on it felt much more naturally conversational than Seventh Heaven, and they also progressed the plot more than The Racket. These movies are my frames of reference, as they're the only silent movies I've really ever seen outside of what was playing in the background when I was a kid. All right, so the next category is character relatability, which I gave an 8. It's very relatable for the most part. Some of the situations in this feel avoidable, and David's stoicism at the end feels wrong. I don't want to give it away. I've tried to avoid spoilers throughout this. Just in case you didn't watch it, there's a scene toward the end between Jack and David that loses relatability. Mary is relatable. I think we've all experienced unrequited love. It's not enjoyable, and it's not enjoyable for Mary, so relatable. All right, so let's go to production value, which I gave a 10. The money and time spent on this production is evident and kind of incredible. It really feels like they spared no expense, but just spending a lot of money doesn't automatically give you a high score in this. You need to use it right, and they definitely did. So it's really an impressive piece of movie making. So let's go to the final category, which is my rank. I gave it an 8.5. I was sort of shocked by how much I enjoyed this film. I was expecting to sort of slog through the silent movies, and Seventh Heaven was a little bit that way, and The Racket was better, but still a little bit that. I saw the runtime of nearly 2.5 hours, and I did not have high hopes for this one. But it was engaging and enjoyable and just really well done. So altogether, that puts Wings at an 82, which puts it in the I'd watch it again here. It actually falls just below Dune 2 and above Anatomy of a Fall and Anora, which I was surprised by. Ultimately, the Academy got their first pick right. So good job, Academy. So thanks for listening, everybody, or watching. If you'd like to see a list of our updated Best Picture Series rankings, you can do that on our website at therankwithjohnandzach.com. Remember to subscribe, review, and comment, and please consider supporting us on our Patreon site at patreon.com/therankedpodcast, where you can get all of our archived episodes. Thanks again, and off we go into the wild blue yonder. So as always, let's start the poll. We're going to... Hey.
He's doing it again.